What if everything you knew about Steven Seagal was a lie? Hollywood called him a legend. But behind the spotlight was a man wrapped in scandals, secrets, and power plays darker than his own movies. He wasn't just fighting villains on screen. He was making enemies in real life, from hidden government ties to shocking accusations that nearly destroyed his career. Steven Seagal's story isn't about fame. It's about how far one man would go to protect his own truth. For decades, the film industry covered up his bizarre behavior, his strange alliances, and his sudden disappearance from Hollywood's spotlight. But now, everything is coming out. The question is, was Steven Seagal the hero or the villain all along? This is the story Hollywood never wanted you to see. In the late 1980s, the silver screen was dominated by gods: Stallone, Schwarzenegger. They were mountains of muscle, wielding impossibly large weapons, saving the world with explosions and one-liners. They were fantastic. They were cartoons. And then, he arrived. He didn't look like them. He was tall, lean, with a severe ponytail and an expression that bordered on boredom. His name was Steven Seagal. His first film, Above the Law, wasn't just a movie. It was a mission statement. The marketing told us this man wasn't just playing a martial artist. He was one. He was, supposedly, the first American to ever own and operate an Aikido dojo in Japan. The story was intoxicating. He wasn't just an actor. He was the real deal. Whispers followed him onto every set. Whispers that he had ties to the CIA, that he had done black ops work in Asia, that he had trained real-world operatives. He didn't just walk into Hollywood. He materialized, fully formed, with a backstory more compelling than any script. His fighting style was brutal, efficient, and utterly captivating. It wasn't the flashy kicks of Van Damme. It was the sharp, painful snap of a wrist, the effortless redirection of energy. He was the Zen warrior, the quiet storm. He wasn't just a new action star, he was a new archetype, and Hollywood and the world was instantly mesmerized by the enigma he presented. The formula was set, and it was golden. Steven Seagal wasn't just a character, he was a force of nature. In Hard to Kill, Marked for Death, and Out for Justice, the plot was almost irrelevant. The structure was always the same. Villains, almost comically evil, would commit a heinous act. They would underestimate the quiet man in the silk jacket. And then, for the next 60 minutes, he would dismantle their entire organization, one snapped bone at a time. He never struggled. He never bled, unless it was a dramatically placed cut on his cheekbone. He was never outmatched. He was, in every sense of the word, invincible. His dialogue was delivered in a low, gravelly monotone, as if he was teaching a philosophy class while simultaneously disabling a room full of attackers. This was his brand. This was the myth. He wasn't just beating the bad guys, he was proving his superiority. And then came Under Siege. This wasn't just an action movie, it was a blockbuster. It was Die Hard on a battleship, and Seagal was at the absolute zenith of his power. He was an A-list, bankable, global superstar. The world didn't just watch his movies, they believed in his persona. He was the quiet, unassuming cook who was, in secret, the most dangerous man on the planet. The irony, of course, is that this persona, the one of quiet, untouchable power, was exactly what he demanded in real life. The line between the invincible hero on screen and the man named Steven Seagal was beginning to blur, not just for the audience, but for him. The drone returns, but now with a faint, discordant piano note, creating unease. The first signs of trouble weren't scandals. They were whispers. Whispers from the crew, from stuntmen, from co-stars. The man who played the calm, Zen master on screen was, according to many, an entirely different person when the cameras stopped rolling. The stories began to leak. Stories of an ego that consumed every set he was on. He would rewrite scripts, direct scenes himself, and belittle anyone who questioned his authenticity. The most famous early warning sign came from, of all places, Saturday Night Live. He was invited to host in 1991, an honor reserved for the biggest stars in the world. He was, and remains, reportedly the single worst host in the show's history. Not because he was bad in the sketches, but because he was arrogant, humorless, and refused to cooperate, reportedly treating the cast and writers with contempt. He was banned for life. Then the stories from his film sets grew darker. Actor John Leguizamo, his co-star on Executive Decision, claims that Seagal, offended by a remark, elbowed him full force against a brick wall, knocking the wind out of him. Seagal allegedly dismissed it, saying it was just part of his technique. Stuntmen, the unsung heroes of his films, began to talk. They spoke of a man who didn't pull his punches, who seemed to take pleasure in testing them, resulting in real injuries. This wasn't professional collaboration. This was bullying. The invincible hero, it seemed, could only maintain his persona by ensuring everyone around him felt small, weak, and intimidated. The stories about his ego were bad, but the stories about his auditions were chilling. Long before the Now Me Too movement gave a name to this kind of power abuse, Steven Seagal's name was whispered in circles of aspiring actresses. The pattern, as alleged by numerous women, was disturbingly consistent. An actress would be told Mr. Seagal wanted to see her for a role, but the audition wouldn't be in a casting office. It would be at his hotel, often late at night. Actress Jenny McCarthy tearfully recounted her audition for Under Siege 2. She arrived to find Seagal alone, asking her to remove her clothing, despite the role having no nudity. When she refused and ran out, she claims he screamed after her not to tell anyone. Portia de Rossi described a similar final audition in his office, where he allegedly told her how important off-screen chemistry was before unzipping his own pants. Juliana Margulies tells a story of arriving at his hotel room, finding him alone with what looked like a gun, and backing out in terror. Over and over, the stories emerged, painting a picture not of a Zen master, but of a predator who allegedly used his A-list power as a lure. In the 1990s, this was the kind of behavior that was buried. It was dismissed as rumor. The women were told to be quiet, that accusing a star of his magnitude was career suicide, and so, for decades, they were. The myth of the hero remained intact, built on a foundation of silence. Hollywood doesn't always punish its villains, but it always punishes its liabilities. By the late 1990s, Seagal's box office magic was fading. His films were becoming repetitive, his persona stale. But more than that, his reputation had become toxic. He was too difficult to work with, his ego too large, his demands too outrageous. And the whispers. The whispers about his behavior towards women were getting louder. The lawsuits were starting to pile up. Studios, one by one, quietly decided he wasn't worth the trouble. His last major theatrical release was Exit Wounds in 2001. After that, he vanished from the A-list. He didn't just fall from grace, he fell off a cliff, straight into the burgeoning world of direct-to-video. This was the ultimate humiliation for a star of his stature. The man who once commanded millions per picture was now churning out 3, sometimes 4, low-budget action films a year. These films, often shot in Eastern Europe, became a parody of his former glory. He was often seated, filmed from the chest up, rumored to be wearing an earpiece to be fed his lines. The sleek martial artist was gone, replaced by a bloated figure who barely seemed to move. This Hollywood exile was a prison of his own making. The industry that had created his myth had now locked him out, leaving him to fade into obscurity. But Seagal was not a man who would fade away. If America wouldn't have him as a hero, he would find a new audience and a new, even stranger reality. Just when the world had written him off as a relic, Steven Seagal orchestrated one of the most surreal comebacks imaginable. In 2009, he starred in Steven Seagal Lawman. This wasn't a movie. It was a reality show, following his real life as a fully commissioned deputy sheriff in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. The premise was baffling. The man who was facing multiple lawsuits for harassment and trafficking was now on television, in uniform, carrying a gun, and fighting crime. It was a masterful, if not completely bizarre, piece of public relations. He was attempting to literally merge his on-screen hero persona with his real life, right in front of the world's cameras. He was no longer playing the cop, he was the cop. The show was a strange, stilted affair, showcasing Seagal teaching younger officers his deadly techniques and going on mundane patrols. But it was his interviews during this period that truly revealed the cracks. In one infamous encounter with a journalist asking about the allegations against him, Seagal, the invincible Zen master, simply stood up, removed his microphone, and walked out of the room. He didn't deny. He didn't defend. He simply left. It was the act of a man who believed he was above the question. The Lawman reality show was short-lived, ending abruptly when new accusations surfaced. The attempt to rewrite his own narrative had failed, exposing him not as a hero, but as a man desperately trying to control a story that was spiraling out of his grasp. Having lost his footing in Hollywood, Steven Seagal pivoted. He didn't just pivot, he defected, culturally and politically. He found a new stage and a new, powerful fan. That fan was Vladimir Putin. The world watched in stunned confusion as the 90s American action hero began appearing at Russian state functions, sitting alongside the Russian president. This was not a casual acquaintance. This was a full-blown public friendship. Seagal would praise Putin as one of the great living world leaders, and Putin, in turn, seemed to enjoy the company of this relic of American tough guy cinema. It was a perfect match. An American star who felt rejected by his own country, and a Russian leader who specialized in collecting and platforming disaffected Western figures. The alliance grew deeper. Seagal was a guest of honor at military parades. He visited Chechnya as a guest of the controversial leader Ramzan Kadyrov. He would promote Russian weapons. Then, in 2016, the ultimate step, Vladimir Putin personally presented Steven Seagal with a Russian passport, granting him full citizenship. The man who built his career playing patriotic American heroes, CIA agents, Navy SEALs, elite cops, was now a citizen of Russia. To his critics, it was the ultimate betrayal, a bizarre, almost comical act of treason. To his supporters, it was hard to find any. The move baffled everyone, but it was just the beginning of his new role. He wasn't just going to be a celebrity citizen. He was going to be an operative. His new citizenship came with a new job title. In 2018, Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs named him a special humanitarian envoy to the United States and Japan. His mission was to facilitate relations in the humanitarian field, including cooperation in culture, arts, public, and youth exchanges. It was a title so absurd, it felt like a plot from one of his own direct-to-video movies. The man who could barely form a coherent sentence in interviews was now a diplomat. The man banned from Saturday Night Live was now a cultural ambassador. It was a performance, and the world was his unwilling audience. But this performance, like his film career, soon ran into trouble. His new status as a global influencer led him into other strange ventures. He became the face of a new cryptocurrency, Bitcoin 2 Gen. He promised his followers it was the next big thing. But the entire venture was a sham. In 2020, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the real law, charged him. He was accused of failing to disclose that he was being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to promote the cryptocurrency. He was, in effect, running a scam. He settled the charges, paying over $300,000, but the damage was done. The special envoy was a fraud. The invincible hero from above the law had become a punchline, a paid shill, a man whose entire public life seemed to be one long, bizarre, and increasingly desperate con. The myth had completely consumed the man. And so what is left? What is the legacy of Steven Seagal? For a generation of fans, this is the hardest question of all. The rise of the Me Too movement forced a global reckoning. The stories that had been dismissed as rumors in the 90s were now being seen in a harsh new light. The allegations from Jenny McCarthy, Portia de Rossi, and Juliana Margulies were reprinted, shared, and finally, believed. The sheer volume of accusations from actresses, models, and journalists painted a devastating picture that was impossible to ignore. For the fans who grew up watching his films, the feeling was one of profound betrayal. It was the realization that the hero they idolized, the quiet warrior they wanted to be, might have been a monster. It's a strange kind of grief. Suddenly, watching Under Siege feels different. The nostalgia is tainted. You can no longer separate the art from the artist. You can't unhear the stories. You can't unsee the bizarre friendship with Putin. You can't unknow the crypto scam. His old movies still play on cable television, but they feel like broadcasts from a different, more naive dimension. The man who was hard to kill had his legacy killed, not by a villain, but by his own alleged actions. The silence from his old fans is deafening. There are no celebrations of his work, no retro fan clubs. There is only the awkward, uncomfortable quiet of a childhood hero who has been completely and utterly disgraced. In the end, what is the real dark secret of Steven Seagal? Is it the alleged abuse, the on-set bullying, the bizarre political alliances, the crypto scams? The truth is, the darkest secret of all is the one he's been trying to hide since 1988. It's the secret that the entire thing was a lie. The man himself seems to be a void, a hollow performance. The secret isn't that he was a bad person. It's that the person we thought we knew never existed at all. He wasn't really a CIA agent. His claims of black ops are unverified. His mastery of Aikido is debated by other masters. His persona as a Zen philosopher is contradicted by every story of his ego. He was the ultimate fabrication. A man who built an empire on a fictional backstory and then spent 30 years trying to force the world to believe it. He became a living parody, a man whose real life was more absurd than his worst movie. The question we asked at the beginning, was he a hero or a villain, was a trick. He was neither. He was simply a reflection. He reflected the 1990s desire for an invincible, flawless hero. And now he reflects the bizarre, fractured, and cynical world of today, a world of grifters and propaganda. The man who played the hero disappeared, and the man who became a Russian envoy is the villain. But the real Steven Seagal, perhaps the greatest secret of all, is that there was never anyone there to begin with.